Welcome to the Multifamily Management Excellence Podcast. Are you interested in learning from multifamily experts and how they achieved success? Then you have come to the right place. Your host, Mike Ballard, interviews industry experts to share their stories and advice to achieving success in the multifamily industry. Our goal is to provide you with resources and tools to increase profitability and achieve success on your own multifamily journey.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to have you back. We've got a great podcast today with Rob Beardsley. He's a principal. He's the founder of Lone Star Capital, has multiple other related entities. He'll talk to you about those and how he put those together. But I'm excited to have Rob. I've known Rob almost since the day he bought his first property. We partnered probably a year later. He's written 2 books. They're great. If you want a free copy on me, the first 10 people that reach out to me, I'll send you either one. We love his thinking and how he operates. And he's a young man that could be a great example. Like for me, I'm an old man. He could be my son. And I'd love for, those of you that are older, use Rob as an example of, how to build a good career and be a good person at the same time. So Rob, we're excited to have you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah. So I saw that you grew up in Silicon Valley. You're not really a tech kid. You grew up in a real estate family. Tell us more about your upbringing and how that led you toward on this path.
Yeah. So growing up in Silicon Valley, I was, of course, surrounded by a lot of tech influence, a lot of tech success and wealth. So I feel like a lot of kids grow up in that area with ideas of becoming successful in tech themselves, which is not a bad idea. And meanwhile, my parents ran a residential brokerage firm from home, and they were not involved in tech. They were involved in real estate, doing construction, doing some development and flips for residential, single family. And they pushed me towards tech. They said, hey, what we do in real estate, it's hard work. We don't make a ton of money. You need to go make the big bucks. You should go into venture capital or a tech startup or something like that. So naturally, I took their advice. I went to college for computer science, figured I would get involved in
And you went to a good college. I mean, where'd you go to college? Tell.
Carnegie Mellon. Yep. I was recruited to play quarterback at Carnegie Mellon. But for me, I kind of lost my passion for football and really wanted to do something more serious that would have long lasting value, because I knew that I wasn't going to go pro. So I didn't want to commit that much time in my college experience to something that wouldn't have lasting value. So turned my attention to kind of making money, to business, to a career. And so while in college, I circled back to real estate because I just, through my research, figured that it really was the best way to make money. And multifamily specifically, which is the business that we're focused in today, it really resonated with me because of its long-term value and long-term wealth driver, where if I invest today, build the business today, I can build assets for years and decades to come through multifamily.
Great. So how many years did you go to college?
2.
2 years. So you quit. What age did you quit college? Drop out?
So at 21, Kent and we had put our first deal under contract, and I dropped out of school shortly thereafter.
Right. So tell us about your partner, Kent, and how you guys became partners.
So Kent and I actually met through a mentorship group at a conference. So we were at a conference. We figured we would connect since we were looking at some similar deals and bidding on some of the same deals. So we figured it'd be best if we chatted, traded some notes, and got to know each other. One thing led to another. We started talking on the phone every day and leaning on each other to grow our acumen and our just wanting to advance in the business. We didn't necessarily from day one say, let's be partners, let's start a company together. It was very organic. And while it happened pretty quickly, it did happen naturally, where we first just figured, hey, let's help each other out on a deal or something. Let's just talk deals. And then one thing led to another, where we finally put our first deal under contract, and we figured, yeah, let's actually formalize this and let's go into business together. So Kent, before meeting me, was a tax attorney at MetLife. He had a long 12-year career and wanted something more entrepreneurial, wanted to make a bigger impact. And, so far so good. We're both really happy.
Good. I'm an entrepreneur. I've helped start multiple businesses. I've been a banker. I helped start banks, and I was on the board of a bank. And I've studied entrepreneurs, and it's amazing how many entrepreneurs are team. They kind of really blossom sometimes when they get the right partner. Talk about kind of how you're the same or how you're opposite and how you complement one another, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Kent and I complement each other extremely well. We have an amazing partnership. So I think the factors of success for this partnership, funny enough, is our age gap. So Kent is 17 years older than me. And when we were starting out, even though we've always been equals, my being younger made me work that much harder, made me want to prove to him that I am worthy of his partnership and that he should take me seriously, just given my age. So I think respect is obviously a foundational component of all healthy relationships. And so that's something that Kent and I have had in a big way. So for me with him, the age thing was a respect, and Kent is just an amazing, respectful person. So he, for whatever reason, respected me back. So, and I worked hard to not lose that. So that is definitely a good chemistry element for us. In terms of the way we complement each other, I'm not the most outgoing person in the world. I would consider myself an introvert, but compared to Kent, I'm quite extroverted. Kent does not like the camera, doesn't like the microphone.
I was going to say, compared to him, you are quite the extrovert, and you never seem to be shy to get on stage or on camera, and you're good at it.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I know what's good for me, and I know what's good for the business. So I put the tie on and present ourselves out there to the world. So that's a good compliment. Every business needs something like that, needs an external face. And especially in today's market where we've gone into more of a thought leadership and a social media age where people really trust people and not brands. You don't trust Coca-Cola, you trust Jamie Dimon, right, at JP Morgan, right? So it's really become a people-centric marketing world out there. So us having a brand and face became really important and apparent to us because originally neither Kent nor I really had an interest in it or thought it was very important. So very lucky that we were able to slide into these roles.
We're going to come back to that as you built your business. So talk about that first deal that you did in 2018. How did, you went, whose workshop did you go to, by the way? Do you remember that workshop that you went to, or the seminar, or
that we met
through some program, right?
Yeah. So Kent and I were in Joe Fairless's mentorship program. That's how we met. And we met at the Best Ever Conference in 2018, which is related to Joe Fairless's mentorship program. So we were in that network, which is a fantastic network. We built many relationships out of that.
Yep, he's one of our investors too. We'll talk about that later, but yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And we put our first deal under contract together in Houston. It was a 261 unit project, very big, ambitious for our first deal. And we really just didn't know what we didn't know. So we had the gumption to put such a big project under contract, and we just figured things out along the way.
How many units was it again?
261.
And what was the purchase price?
15.4 million.
15.4 million. Great. And how much money did you have to raise?
4.5.
And it was scary?
Very, very scary. We struggled. That was the one of the biggest struggles that we'd ever had. And we learned many lessons through that. And raising money is still hard. So it just shows you how important it is.
So how did you put your list together on who to ask to raise money? Was it all through the Fairless Network, or?
We started with family and friends, the Joe Fairless Network, really just everyone who we had been meeting up to that point. I mean, our network was very limited at that time compared to today. And it just through sheer force, we had basically reached out to every single person we knew, and we asked them for introductions and connections. And one thing led to another where we were able to quickly grow the network. But that's really just not the ideal way to do it. Growing by necessity, it gets the job done, but it's very stressful and probably not the most successful way to go.
Okay, so I found in my own fundraising and also listening to others, there's plateaus, right? You raise a chunk, and then you're like, oh no, there's a little stress, and then you kind of get your second wind and you raise another chunk. Describe that first deal. How much did you raise easily before you kind of had to regroup and do phase 2 or whatever?
Yeah, so through the immediate family and friends, I want to say we raised somewhere around $1 million or so. So we felt pretty good about that. But then the family and friends exhausted pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So where to go from there? So we had to reach out to people who would be interested in partnering with us and bringing their investors to the table. We really were, we had, by necessity, we had to be very scrappy. And the thing I kept telling myself through that experience is not to worry about how much of the deal I was going to end up with, or what pieces of the pie I had to give away to get the deal done. I had to keep the long-term vision in mind and just realize that closing the deal in itself would be a huge victory. And my dad would even say, if you had to pay money to close this deal, it's worth it, just because of how it will set us up for future success. So I kept a good positive attitude with that in mind. And when we were getting negotiated against ourselves and, forced to take what I would consider not ideal terms, it was well worth it because we needed to get off the ground.
So you shared a big chunk of the GP, is that correct?
That's correct.
Got it. So then you and I met probably at an IMN conference, is that right? Either in
That's
New
right.
York or LA. Do you remember where that was?
Yeah, it was in Santa Monica, and I believe Kent had met you prior to that, or at least a phone call, and had
Yes.
told us to connect at the Santa Monica conference.
That's correct. Yeah. So Kent, I had noticed Kent had been hitting our website and sending me emails and having questions. And so Ascent Multifamily, right? We do back office accounting, and we help companies start up and help provide those resources. And he kept picking our brain and that type of thing. And we met in Santa Monica. And I think you and I and your dad, was that the time that we went to dinner?
Yeah.
Right. And so I remember when you were buying probably another property there in Houston. And you realized that you probably didn't want to start your own management company yet, right? You wanted to be vertically integrated, but it wasn't the right time. Talk about that process.
Yeah, so we knew the value of vertical integration, of bringing property management, construction management in-house, but it's not easy. It's actually very difficult. And normally companies do that when they achieve quite a bit of scale and experience, whether that be 1,000 units, 2,000 units, 5,000 units. So Kent and I, we felt strongly just through our previous experiences and our desire to impress upon our investors the importance that we place on the operations and transparency and control. We wanted to be vertically integrated much sooner than that. So we had set out on a plan to get there. And we actually were successful a couple of years ago in vertically integrating, back when we only had around 650 units or so. And that was certainly thanks in part due to Ascent with the back office multifamily accounting, because that's a big component of what a management company really does. That is a big burden at the corporate level, because it can be expensive if you don't have a fractional accounting setup such as Ascent.
Right. So I remember when Kent and I were having those discussions, I said, why don't you go with one of our other clients in that market? And I think you used one of our clients for a year, but I told them from the get-go, these guys are going to be independent and they just want to get started with you, and you're going to teach them a lot of good habits. And there was a woman, Anne-Marie Bomba, that was the founder and president of that management company, and she was willing to work with you. And it was a great, nice symbiotic relationship. And I think you found that, and I found that with you, where we don't look, a lot of people in this industry don't look at each other as competitors, and except for when you're trying to get the deal. But then once somebody has the property secured, people share, right? I remember So I started Ascent. I was one of the founders of Ascent, Multifamily Accounting. And we started that about 9 years ago. And after watching all my clients, including this young whippersnapper that was always so good, well dressed, buy properties, I said, I want to do that too. So in 2019, we tied up a property. We went through the Dave Lindahl RE Mentor program, and we decided to try and tie up a property. And we put together our list of 1,000 people that we emailed to, and then we dialed for dollars. And I remember we hit a plateau. We were only trying to raise 700,000. And it was like, we hit a quick plateau of only 150 grand. And then I got a phone call from Rob. You remember that phone call?
I don't remember this phone call.
Oh, so you said, hey, Mike, where are you on your fundraise? And how much more do you have to raise? And I said, well, we've only raised 150 of the 700 we're trying to raise. And you said, would you be willing to share the GP if we brought you the rest of the money? And I said, sure. I talked to my partner, Kevin, and we said, sure. And basically 4 or 5 days later, you said, I got it. And it worked out. And that's your philosophy that you stated earlier about sharing and making sure you get the deal done. And you know, there's a lot of people in this industry, which I love, that have this abundance mentality that said, help him, help me, and we share. And I found that to be so true. So then talk about going from a few properties to now you've got many thousands of units. Talk about how your organization's changed and what's been important to you as you've been maturing your organization.
So the big growth that for us has occurred, and that it is really important to have happen if you want to scale, is certainly your network. And we have had the good fortune of dramatically expanding our network over the last 3 to 5 years. And that is due in large part of our marketing efforts and thought leadership and doing podcasts like this and promoting ourselves and the couple books that I've published. So all that effort has really been valuable. People often ask, well, are all the videos that you make or the social media posts or the books, are they actually worthwhile? Is it valuable to you? And the answer is absolutely. We have met so many investors, met so many partners through all those efforts. So that's one way that we've really grown, since 2019, 2018. The other way is just experience. We've now bought almost $500 million in multifamily. And not every deal is smooth, as you know. So we've learned a thing or two from going through difficult deals, through working with many different partners who have their own experiences that they bring to the table. So we really just have matured so much and learned so much through the experience we've had so far.
I have one question for you. As you've been building your client base, do you know how many investors you have today?
I think we have somewhere around 250.
250. And the typical deal you're raising is a 200 to 350 unit property. What's the typical equity raise?
10 to 20 million.
10 to 20 million. And is that typically still, family offices and individuals, or have you gone to institutional investors now?
A bit of both. I mean, we're not necessarily looking to transition. We are really desirous of building a bigger and bigger retail investor base of individuals, while also looking to build relationships with institutional investors. So some of our deals will have just one joint venture equity partner putting up 90% of the equity. And then other deals we do in more of a syndication style, where we just have a bunch of investors at 100 to 500,000.
I got it. Okay, great. That's good to know. And the one thing I've got to say about Rob is his group has worked hard and had this discipline to network and to learn from other people. Do you remember you and I were having dinner in Washington, D.C.? This is one of the funniest stories I remember. We were sponsoring a conference. You were at the conference. One of my other clients was at the conference, and we go to dinner with this broker, and he basically talks about having this property in Texarkana that he said is just a dog property and he couldn't wait to unload it. And do you remember that dialogue? Talk about what you remember
Amazing.
that story.
Such a funny story. I can't remember. Oh, it's trying to remember the guy's name, but I actually just saw him. I just saw him at NMHC, and we just laugh about this now. So
Eddie Lauren is his name.
Eddie Lauren, yeah.
Eddie
So
Lauren, great guy.
I was hanging out with him in Vegas for NMHC. So at the time when we met up in DC, my parents, so my company Lone Star had identified a very interesting opportunity to buy a distressed property in Texarkana. Now, Texarkana, for those that don't know, which you probably don't, is a small tertiary market of about 130,000 people, 3 hours east of Dallas. And it's not necessarily known for its growth or known for anything. And this property in particular was half vacant. It had leaky roofs, mold, had tons of crime, and a lot of units were just missing appliances, missing flooring, and just not at all in rent-ready condition. So this was a troubled property. And my parents, given their background in construction and just dealing with real estate headaches, frankly, this got them excited. So instead of my company Lone Star buying the property, my parents, seeking a change in their life and seeking a change in their business, said, "Hey, we'll buy the deal." So my parents bought the property, and at that time of the DC dinner, we had it under contract. And so this Eddie at dinner is bragging about, I don't know if he's bragging, but he's saying, "Oh gosh, I'm super happy to be selling this property. It's just a complete nightmare, horrible deal."
I've tried
And I said,
different ways to make it work. And
right. They've tried all these different ways. They've tried new management companies. They tried to do renovation. And I said, "Oh, that's funny. We have that deal under contract."
yeah. And
So
we, unbeknownst, when both of you accepted dinner with me at this restaurant, and the broker from LA was just laughing. Every time we see each other, we laugh about that dinner. Because here's two guys that said, "I'm getting rid of this dog property," and you're talking about,
I've got a great deal.
I got a great deal. And how did it turn out for your parents?
So all credit to my parents, of course. They actually, for the first 6 months, moved to the property.
Into the property. I remember that. Yeah.
They took a 3-bedroom, renovated it nicely for themselves, and they lived at the property for 6 months, and they sat over the operations and construction and completely changed the culture. They cultivated a fantastic team that is super loyal and hardworking on site, and the property got completely turned around. And now the property has the highest rents for Class C 1970s vintage apartments in Texarkana. That my parents have over tripled their money on the deal. And we even bought the property next door and combined the two properties for a total of 300 units to operate them in total more efficiently. So, not to say that Eddie was wrong, but certainly my parents have been very successful with those properties.
Yeah, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And it's amazing because we're getting in a weird environment today, right? All kinds of loans are coming due. People are going to be forced to sell a lot of properties. And talk about what opportunities you see in today's environment.
Today's environment is very tough, very tough. We're seeing, it's always hard to find good deals, but today I think it's even harder just because where the volatility of the interest rate market, interest rates have been up. Now they've come down a little bit. It's a very funky market. So I'm not seeing a ton of opportunity in the market right now, unfortunately. So we're staying active. We're in communication. We're bidding on a lot of properties. But I do think that it's not going to be until towards the end of the year where things are kind of equalize again and buyers and sellers are going to come together. Because right now there is a pretty big gap between buyers and sellers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what's funny is I'm on both of those, right? So I've got 3 properties that we're thinking of selling, and I'm believing they're worth up here. And then there's other properties. I'm like, why doesn't that seller realize that the property should be valued down here now? And, we're in that place. And there's some people that are going to be forced. I mean, there is literally I think $2.5 trillion worth of loans coming due in the next 18 months. Because they're on 5-year or 1-year bridge or that type of thing. But multifamily loans are, so there's opportunity. And so you decided to write some books. your first book was so well received. It was so well written. And I just found out, I didn't know this when we booked the podcast, that you published another one. Talk about your second book.
Yes, the second book has been really exciting since we had the benefit of experience from the first book. So the second book is called Structuring and Raising Debt and Equity for Real Estate. And it really builds on the first book. The first book, I talked about our underwriting process of how we evaluate potential acquisitions. And I paired that with our underwriting model that I've put together and that we use every single day to analyze property. And it's available for free on our website. So in the first book, teaching how to evaluate acquisitions, I wanted to write another book to really talk about actually putting the deal together, because sure, it's great, you know how to identify a good opportunity, but how do you actually act on it? You need to be able to structure the debt, structure the equity, and then go out and raise it from lenders and investors to actually put the capital structure together. So it's a topic that I really enjoy. I think it's fascinating thinking through deal structure, and it's like a puzzle, making everybody happy, creating win-wins. So that's the essence of the second book.
Well, I look forward to getting it and reading it. Talk about the markets you're in and kind of what you're thinking about over the next couple of years, other markets and other opportunities. You're sticking with multifamily?
Sticking with multifamily, our company is here based in New York City, but we focus exclusively on Dallas and Houston. So we're very focused. We're not even necessarily looking at markets outside of those major metros in Texas. We really want to be in Dallas and Houston. And there's a few reasons for that. Primarily it's focus. By being focused, we feel like we can identify opportunities better, build better relationships, and have a highest chance of actually transacting on good deals. And then number two, it goes back to the management. Because we're vertically integrated, it just doesn't make sense to have our team on planes going from Columbus, Ohio to Tampa, Florida to Dallas, Texas, right? So having geographically clustered portfolios allows much easier time for our management team to oversee our portfolio.
Right. So you're 5 years into building your business, right? You bought your first property in 2018. It could have been just an ad hoc deal with Kent, but you decided to build a firm, build a brand. Talk about the different companies that you put together to be this vertically integrated organization.
Yep. So Lone Star Capital is our flagship private equity company. And then a couple years ago in 2021, we vertically integrated. We formed Radiance Living, which is our in-house property management firm based in Houston. So we have a 5-person corporate team and growing down in Houston.
With Ascent as your partner?
With Ascent as our partner, overseeing the portfolio. And then more recently in 2022, we launched Radiance Construction, which is the in-house construction arm. And we have a construction manager, and we're hiring team members there to actually do construction in-house, right? And so that's really exciting. And that is kind of growing all the different ways that we are vertically integrating, as well as eventually creating additional streams of revenue and profit for ourselves.
Right. So Radiance Management is a wholly owned subsidiary of Lone Star Capital?
Yes.
And you charge a management fee just like a third-party manager would, right?
That's right.
And so that is something we advise a number of our clients to do as well, to do that, create that. And you even changed the name of the brand from Lone Star to Radiance. Why'd you do that?
It's a great question, because some vertically integrated firms, they have the same company as the ownership company and the management company, and then others don't. We kind of felt that we wanted to have an externally facing management brand for our residents, right? We wanted to have Radiance Living be what our residents think of when they. Thank you. So when they live at a Radiance Living property, they want to be feeling happy and radiant and comfortable, right? Whereas if they walk into the office and all they see is Lone Star Capital everywhere, it just doesn't, it feels more corporate.
Yeah.
And another thing too is we want there to be somewhat of a separation to where residents aren't picking up the phone and calling up Kent about a clogged toilet, right? So Radiance Living and Lone Star, there's a bit of separation.
Okay. So how old are you now, if you don't mind my asking?
26.
26 years old. And how many units today and how many properties?
Well, including the deals we have under contract, we're just over 3,000 units. And we've acquired now, I believe, 16 properties.
Right. And how many have you sold?
2.
And do you think in the next 12 months, you're going to be a net buyer or a net seller?
I believe net buyer.
Yeah. So, I love your example of, a young person that at the very start, you said you went to this session and you talked with other people because you didn't know what you didn't know. I think that's such a great self-awareness that helps you be so successful. So we're appreciative of that. Outside of your own books, what book do you recommend to anyone out there listening to this podcast?
Well, there's so many. I really attribute reading to a big portion of my success. I started reading at 16, which felt late at the time, but I never liked to read. And then at 16, I started reading and I got hooked. I was reading all sorts of business books, personal finance books, self-help books.
What are your three of your classic all-time books?
Classic all-time books. Well, so one that I always love to bring up is Getting More by Professor Stuart Diamond. That's a really good negotiation book. And it's not like negotiation as in me and you are against each other adversarially, right? It's more so collaborative negotiation. He has really great stories and real actionable advice. So Getting More is great. The classics are the classics, like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich. These are just kind of things that you need to check the box and say that you've read and maybe go back to from time to time.
Awesome. And then one current book that you're reading.
I'm currently reading The 48 Laws of Power, and I've read it once before, and I think the lessons in it are just so profound. And if you actually take them in and really think about them, they can have a major impact. It's easy to read and then just forget about, but if you actually read and keep it on the top of your mind, I think it's extremely powerful.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of that. There's several books that I try to listen to. I do Audible big time, and I try to listen to them about once every 18 months. Well, thank you very much for participating in our Multifamily Management Excellence podcast. I think there's a lot of things I'm mentoring a bunch of younger entrepreneurs in the industry, and I'm going to make sure that they listen to this to learn. So, Rob, we appreciate it greatly, and everyone, will talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you to Ascent Multifamily Accounting for making this podcast possible. Ascent has a team of multifamily accounting experts that provide outsourced bookkeeping for multifamily management companies. To learn more about Ascent Multifamily Accounting, go to multifamilyaccounting.com. We hope you have enjoyed listening to the Multifamily Excellence podcast. If you want to hear more from multifamily experts like this, you can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. We appreciate your support and can't wait to have you join us again for our next episode. Until then, take care.